Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
7:37 on WMAL. Brian Neiman, Brian Wilson with you. It's been a fast and furious kind of morning, and we'll continue the conversation now with Bret Baier from the Fox News Channel. Good morning, Bret. How are you?
Good morning.
So, do you know when the president invokes executive privilege in this particular case, what is included in executive privilege? Are we talking all 1,300 documents that Darrell Issa and company want to see? Are we talking everything related to Fast and Furious, or does it only have to pertain to a conversation between the president and somebody at the Justice Department?
No, it doesn't have to do that, the latter part that you just mentioned. It could be deliberations within senior White House staff, with the Justice Department about how to proceed, how to deal with media communications, interactions with Darrell Issa. There are different levels of executive privilege, but those deliberative things that involve the executive branch, could be covered by executive privilege being invoked. But it does have to be kind of outlined and defended what exactly is being talked about. I remember Karl Rove and Harriet Miers.
Right.
Were covered in executive privilege invoked by President Bush during the U.S. Attorney scandal.
All right, so what is the buzz? I mean, there was always, John Boehner seemed to be leery of wanting this to ever go to a full vote. He has said that he will allow it to go to vote next week, but are the Republicans leery about this, or are they saying, hey, this is what's going to happen, it's the thing that we're kind of forced to do at this point?
Well, it's really interesting. I think the politics of this could cut both ways, and I do think that there are some Republicans who are leery about it. They like the messaging on the economy, they like the messaging on jobs, and that this is not only off message, it's just it could be painted a different way that's not great for Republicans. However, I do think that the fact that you have an Attorney General who's been negotiating back and forth in a scandal that has been 18 months in the making. He's appeared 9 times on Capitol Hill to testify. And there's this whole push and pull about documents. Then there's a negotiation that happens the other night at 5 o'clock on Wednesday, on Tuesday.
Tuesday, right.
And then suddenly there's an executive privilege invoked. I think that raises eyebrows, and politically, I don't think that's a net positive for the administration.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, Bret, about how it seems that we've been immersed in the story. You followed it, Brian and I have followed it, and people who listen to this program have followed it, but I'm not sure the guys in Iowa and Oklahoma and Nebraska, in the middle America, I don't think they've followed it that closely.
Yeah.
So there's an education process.
How many people know it? I'm surprised about that when just anecdotally talking to folks out throughout the country, but you're right. I mean, one part is that it hasn't gotten a lot of coverage. I mean, NBC Nightly News, I did a piece on the Grapevine last night, spent 10 seconds on it since it started. That was just the first mention last week. So you're right. It hasn't gotten a lot of play. It's impossible to avoid now as far as a news story, and that changes the dynamic a little bit.
Now, if I were Eric Holder, I would be praying for one thing today, and that would be that about 10 o'clock this morning there was an Obamacare ruling out of the Supreme Court, because that would certainly change the topic.
That's right.
But, I mean, I'm getting the sense that's not likely.
Well, I don't know. I think it's either today or Monday, and there are some rumblings that it was today, but I think those rumblings are just, betting on today. You're running out of days to bet on. It's possible, but you're right. I mean, that would immediately take the focus off. It's almost like if you remember Gary Condit and 9/11.
Yeah.
It changed the focus.
Although the heat will go back on next week when there's actual vote in the House for contempt, so it'll all move around.
Exactly.
But it's been an interesting couple of months now for President Obama, and if you get the Obamacare coming up today, the whole immigration thing that happened last week, it'd be kind of fascinating to have a press conference in the next couple of weeks, because there's a lot of questions to ask the president. Anything about that? Is there a possibility of that anytime soon, or do you think they'll just hold off on that for a while?
I think there'll have to be if there's a ruling against the health care law, there will have to be some kind of appearance, and I would assume some of that would that's a possibility. There would be questions involved in something like that, and I agree with you. I mean, there's a number of different questions to ask. This administration, this president, has not had a great run over the past, I'd say, 6 weeks, and you know, a lot of political analysts on both sides of the aisle are saying the launch for the campaign was not exactly stellar. Yet you have these polls that show the president's still doing pretty well. In fact, that one poll, what was it?
The Bloomberg poll.
Bloomberg, 53-40, something
yeah,
like that.
do you buy that? We were talking about that earlier. That seems really to be an outlier poll.
Seems like it, but, you know, when I think it was the New York Times poll came out with Romney ahead, I think that was the poll, and the Obama campaign was saying, oh, the inner workings of this poll are skewed, and here's why, and there was an immediate outrage from Stephanie Cutter and the folks from Chicago. They're surprisingly silent out of the Bloomberg poll.
Well, you know, Neil Monroe, the guy from the Daily Caller, caught a lot of flack for standing up in the middle of the Rose Garden and interrupting the president. But I get the sense that there is some frustration among the people who cover President Obama that there are so few opportunities to actually question the man that they are sent there to cover.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can see that frustration. I think, to be honest, I think Neil was out of line. He says he thought the president was finished. You know, Brian, standing in the Rose Garden, I mean, you got to wait till the end of the statement.
Yeah.
And but that's neither here nor there. I think there is a frustration about asking enough questions to the president. I will say that he's had a couple of more press briefings recently than he had a year or two ago.
All right, I understand you have a special guest on the show tonight, huh?
Yeah, we have Ann Romney on with Dr. Mark Siegel. You know, he's our head medical person on our Fox Medical team. Mm-hmm. She goes into detail about fighting multiple sclerosis and cancer in an emotional way that you haven't seen before out of her. So it's kind of an interesting piece. And obviously we're following up on Fast and Furious and waiting to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, could be a busy night. Thanks, Bret, as always. We appreciate it. Great.